This is RandomNet, where we explore the randomness of internet. And the best part of this is the uncertainty, the randomness of different stages of the entire stream. Like for instance, I don't even know which platform I'm gonna be uh, talking about, and then we don't know what specific article or content we'll be talking about. So I love the extra layer of randomness or uncertainty because life is filled with these kind of uncertainties, right? Like we do have control over a few things where we know what to expect, but are you 100% sure that you're gonna get what you're expecting? Probably not, and that's why I feel this particular process of talking about random things on internet is kind of mimic it this process kind of mimic the life itself. So that's why I love doing this, even though I missed it out yesterday. All right, let's see where we're gonna land. YouTube. Oh, Goodreads. Good job, Goodreads. We were talking about Goodreads just last during our last session. So again, what are the chances? In my experience, quite a lot. There were times when I got like Reddits like in a row, like 2 or 3 times. There are times when I got IMDb in a row. Now good reads in a row. So it's it seems kind of like a you know the chance of getting the same option again next time is not dependent on the previous time. And I think I might have like talked about this during one of my live streams. All right, let's check out. I like the idea of going through some quotes. How about that? Well, the popular quotes are from Oscar Wilde: "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." From Marilyn Monroe: "I'm selfish, impatient, and a little insecure. I make mistakes. I am out of control and at times hard to handle. But if you can't handle me at my worst, then you sure as hell don't deserve me at my best." Two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe. Albert Einstein. So many books, so little time. Frank Zappa. A room without books is like a body without a soul. Marcus Tullius Cicero. Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Bernard Barsh. You have gotta dance like there's nobody watching, love like you'll never be hurt, sing like there's nobody listening, and live like it's heaven on earth. William W. Perky. You know you're in love when you can't fall asleep because reality is finally better than your dreams. Dr. Seuss. You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough. Mae West. Be the change that you wish to see in the world. Mahatma Gandhi. In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned. In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. Robert Frost. If you want to know what a man's like, take a good look at how he treats his inferiors, not his equals. J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Don't walk in front of me. I may not follow. Don't walk behind me. I may not lead. Walk beside me. Just be my friend. Albert Camus. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. Mark Twain. Friendship is born at the moment when one man says to another, "What? You too? I thought that no one but myself." C.S. Lewis in The Four Loves. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Maya Angelou. A friend is someone who knows all about you and still loves you. Albert Hubbard. To live in the rarest to live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist. That is all. Oscar Wilde. Always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. Oscar Wilde. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. Mahatma Gandhi. Darkness cannot drive our darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive our hate. Only love can do that. Martin Luther King Jr. in A Testament of Hope, the Essential Writings and Speeches. We accept the love we think we deserve. Stephen Chbosky in The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Without music, life would be a mistake. Friedrich Nietzsche in Twilight of the Idols. In Twilight of the Idols. I'm so clever that sometimes I don't understand a single word of what I'm saying. Oscar Wilde in The Happy Prince and Other Stories. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They are not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Rob Siltonen. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. Narcotics Anonymous. I believe that everything happens for a reason. People change so that you can learn to let go. Things go wrong so that you appreciate them when they're right. You believe lies so you eventually learn to trust no one but yourself. And sometimes good things fall apart so better things can fall together. Marilyn Monroe. It is better to be hated for what you are than to be loved for what you are not. Andre Gide in Autumn Leaves. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. Ed Jackson Brown Jr. P.S. In P.S. I Love You. Only once in your life, I truly believe you find someone who can completely turn your world around. You tell them things that you have never shared with any another soul, and they absorb everything you say and actually want to hear more. You share hopes for the future, dreams that will never come true, goals that were never achieved, and the many disappointments life has thrown at you. When something wonderful happens, you can't wait to tell them about it, knowing they will share in your excitement. They are not embarrassed to cry with you when you are hurting or laugh with you when you make a fool of yourself. Never do they hurt your feelings or make you feel like you're not good enough, but rather they build you up and show you the things about yourself that make you special and even beautiful. There is never any pressure, jealousy, or competition, but only a quiet calmness when they are around. You can be yourself and not worry about what they will think of you because they love you for who you are. The things that seem insignificant to most people, such as a note, song, or walk, become invaluable treasures kept safe in your heart to cherish forever. Memories of your childhood come back and are so clear and vivid, it's like being young again. Colors seem brighter and more brilliant. Laughter seems part of daily life where before it was infrequent or didn't exist at all. A phone call or two during the day helps to get you through a long day's work and always bring a smile to your face. In their presence, there's no need for continuous conversation, but you find you are quite content in just having them nearby. Things that never interested you before become fascinating because you know they are important to this person who is so special to you. You think of this person on every occasion and in everything you do. Simple things bring them to mind, like a pale blue sky, gentle wind, or even a storm cloud on the horizon. You open your heart knowing that there's a chance it may be broken one day, and in opening your heart, you experience a love and joy that you never dreamed possible. You find that being vulnerable is the only way to allow your heart to feel true pleasure that's so real it scares you. You find strength in knowing you have a true friend and possibly a soulmate who will remain loyal to the end. Life seems completely different, exciting, and worthwhile. Your only hope and security is in knowing that they are part of your life. Bob Marley. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadow shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. J.R.R. Tolkien in The Friendship of the Ring. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The person, be it gentleman or lady, who has not pleasure in a good novel must be intolerably stupid. Jane Austen in Northanger Abbey. Okay, I just realized that this video transition stopped working. I hate when things like that happen. I mean, um, but I don't know what's the problem with OBS is. OBS is the software I use to live stream and whatnot, and I don't know why it freezes so often, but look like it's working now. Cool. So we were here. Yeah, I read this beautiful quote from Bob Marley and this witty one from J.R.R. Tolkien. But let's jump where we left off. Imperfection is beauty, madness is genius. And it's better to be absolutely ridiculous about absolutely boring. Marilyn Monroe. It's better to be absolutely ridiculous than absolutely boring. Okay. There are two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle, the other is as though everything is a miracle. Albert Einstein. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Good friends, good books, and a sleepy conscience. This is the ideal life. Mark Twain. As he read, I fell in love the way you fall asleep, slowly and then all at once. John Green in The Fault in Our Stars. We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. Oscar Wilde in Lady Windermere's Fan. Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. Neil Gaiman in Coraline. The fool doth think he's wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. William Shakespeare in As You Like It. It is better to remain silent at the risk of being to- It is better to remain silent at the risk of being thought a fool than to talk and remove all doubt of it. Maurice Switzer in Mrs. Goose, her book. Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to reform or pause and reflect. Mark Twain. Life is what happens to us while we are making other plans. Alan Saunders. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift of God, which is why we call it the present. Bill Keane. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Thomas A. Edison. It is a lack of love, but a lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages. Friedrich Nietzsche. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of art is not ugliness, it's indifference. The opposite of faith is not heresy, it's indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, it's indifference. Ellie Whistle. A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong it is until it's in hot water. Eleanor Roosevelt. The man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read. Mark Twain. I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where. I love you simply, without problems or pride. I love you in this way because I do not know any other way of loving but this, in which there is no I or you. So intimate that your hand upon my chest is my hand. So intimate that when I fall asleep, your eyes close. Pablo Neruda in 100 Love Sonnets. I may not have gone where I intended to go, but I think I have ended up where I needed to be. Douglas Adams in The Long Dark Tea Time and of the Soul. If you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Gordon A. Eddy. I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good. J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Outside of a dog, a book is man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read. Groucho Marx, the essential Groucho, writings for, by, and about Groucho Marx. I'm enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imag- Imagination encircles the world. Albert Einstein. Love all. Trust a few. Do wrong to none. William Shakespeare in All's Well That Ends Well. I like nonsense. It wakes up the brain cells. Fantasy is a necessary ingredient in living. Dr. Seuss. Have you ever been in love? Horrible, isn't it? It makes you so vulnerable. It opens your chest and it opens up your heart, and it means that someone can get inside you and mess you up. Neil Gaiman in The Sandman, Volume 9, The Kindly Ones. Well, those were these are some of the popular quotes. I, I'm not sure if I want to continue to talk about quotes, but if I do, let's check out some funny quotes because that should be great. Yeah, it's look like there are a lot of quotes from comedians and whatnot. Perfect. Let's check this out. Funny quotes. You know, the world is going crazy. Come on. You know, the world is going crazy when the best rapper is a white guy. The best golfer is a black guy. The tallest guy in the NBA is Chinese. The Swiss hold the America's Cup. France is accusing the US of arrogance. Germany doesn't want to go to war, and the three most powerful men in America are named Bush, Dick, and Colin. Need I say more? Chris Rock. Well, don't expect us to be too impressed. We just saw Finnick Ogier in his underwear. Suzanne Collins in Mockingjay. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to a garage makes you an automobile. Billy Sunday in the Billy Sunday, the Man and the Message, with his own words, which have won thousands for Christ. Okay. The planet is fine. The people are fucked. George Carlin. Never go to bed mad. Stay up and fight. Phyllis Diller. I did not attend his funeral, but I sent a nice letter saying I approved of it. Mark Twain. What the hell is that? I laughed. It's my fox hat. Your fox hat? Yeah, Pudge, my fox hat. Why are you wearing your fox hat? I asked. Because no one can catch the motherfucking fox. John Green in Looking for Alaska. Accept who you are unless you're a serial killer. Ellen DeGeneres. Seriously, I'm kidding. It's not true that I had nothing on. I had the radio on. Marilyn Monroe. Everyone should be able to do one card trick, tell two jokes, and recite three poems, in case they are ever trapped in an elevator. Lemony Snicket in Horseradish. They love their hair because they are not smart enough to love something more interesting. John Green in Looking for Alaska. Once you once you can accept the universe as matter expanding into nothing, then is something. Wearing stripes with plate comes easy. Albert Einstein. When life gives you lemons, squirt someone in the eye. Kathy Guswhite. It's not because I want to make one. It's not because I want to make out with her. Hold on. He grabbed a pencil and scrawled excitedly at the paper as if he'd just made a mathematical breakthrough and then looked back up at me. I just did some calculations, and I've been able to determine that you're full of shit. John Green in Looking for Alaska. If a book about failures doesn't sell, is it a success? Jerry Seinfeld. I came from a real tough neighborhood. Once a guy pulled a knife on me. I knew he wasn't professional. The knife had butter on it. Rodney Dangerfield. Jasper knocked his head against the hull and cast his eyes heavenward. Fine, but if Pekka Rollins kills us all, I'm going to get Villain Ghost to teach my ghost how to play the flute just so that I can annoy the hell out of your ghost. Brecker's lips quirked. I'll just hire Matthias. I'll just hire Matthias' ghost to kick your ghost ass. My ghost won't associate with your ghost, Matthias said primly, and then wondered if the sea air was rotting his brain. Lou Verdugo in Six of Crows. Wow, just with only like 6,000 votes? What? Where are we heading? Is this all? Come on, Goodreads. Now we are getting into like quotes in a book. Don't be humble. You're not that great. By Golda Meir. I thought I'd lie on the floor and write in plain for a while. He grunted. It relaxes me. It does. Oh, you're being sarcastic. That's a good sign, probably. Cassandra Clare in The City of Ashes. Okay. Maybe. I'm probably gonna skip the quotes from the books. All right. I cannot go to school today, said little Peggy and McKay. Okay, this seems to be like another poem or something. A word to the wise and necessary. It's the stupid ones who need advice. Bill Cosby. If you're too open-minded, your brains will fall out. Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Never miss a good chance to shut up. Will Rogers. Again, this. I wonder if they have, if Goodreads have like a collection of poems, like not the books based on poems, like the actual poems itself. Yeah, I doubt. Cool. All right. So, what do you want to check? Last time we were going through like best books, like award-winning books of 2022, like Goodreads Choice Awards. What I want to check today is maybe like how about psychology? Either psychology or is it like you can check comics. Or maybe self-help. Great. So the collection of books based out of psychology. Atomic Habits, the good one. How to Keep Your House While Drowning. Okay. Never Finished by David Goggins. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. By the way, How to Keep Your House While Drowning by Casey Davis. And Atomic Habits by James Clear. I want to die, but I want to eat Tekopoki by Bakesy He. There are quite a few. I've read Can't Hurt Me. I've read Atomic Habits. Let's see if there is any other. No other book in this list. I'm kind of curious about Atlas of the Heart book by Brené Brown. Um, these are all classics. Let's see. Let's check this out. But Never Finished by David Goggins. So, Never Finished. Unshackle Your Mind and Win the War Within by David Goggins. This is not a self help book, it's a wake up call. Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins' smash hit memoir, demonstrated how much untapped ability we all have, but was merely an introduction to the power of the mind. In Never Finished, Goggins takes you inside his mental lab, where he developed the philosophy, psychology, and strategies that enabled him to learn what he thought was his limit was only his beginning, and that the quest for greatness is unending. The stories and lessons in this raw, revealing, unflinching memoir offer the reader a blueprint they can use to climb from the bottom of the barrel into a whole new stratosphere that once seemed unattainable. Whether you feel off course in life, are looking to maximize your potential, or drain your soul to break through your so called glass ceiling, this is the only book you will ever need. That's some powerful choice of words to describe the book. All right. Benjamin rated the 2 stars with a comment. I respect Goggins, the shit he's overcoming, and his work ethic. I can't say his approach or attitude toward life is for me, but fair enough. Mad respect for the guy, and I loved his last book. Going into this book, I had really hoped he had worked through a lot of his trauma. It has been clear to me for a long time that his messed up past really impacted him. He smothers his emotional pain with physical pain. He isn't alone on this, it's quite common and manifests into various ways. Although he says in the book that he has worked through his trauma and has overcome it, it is clear that is not the case. I found this to be very disappointing. Someone who says things like that weak ass bitch and even calls himself a soft ass bitch when he's only doing 2 a day workouts is clearly someone that has a lot of emotional issues to work through. His language around his father and brother clearly show anger or resentment toward the events of his childhood. The negative way he speaks of anyone that appears soft or makes excuses. It's clear there are deep issues at play. David, if you're reading this, as you sometimes do with negative reviews, I challenge you. You weak ass bitch. Your physical feats have become routine. They aren't even hard for you anymore. They are nothing compared to the real challenge of working through all your emotional baggage. Going in really, really deep and excavating all that shit. Can you handle that shit? Are you man enough to handle that shit? If you are, that would be the challenge of your lifetime. And most likely, take the rest of your lifetime. I hope you take that plunge. By Benjamin. Okay, so moving on. Well, this is 5 star, but I'm kind of curious about another 2 star. Okay, let's check out what Diana have to say. Dear David, you speak true to many things: resilience, self doubt, and fulfilling one's potential. Yours is the grit of, as you term it, a savage, and I deeply admire and respect you for it. But, David, I do get the sense that you have not yet conquered your final enemy. You cast him in the shadows and believe that he can be banished for good with more physical pain, with another 100 miler. But this isn't the language of lactic acid torture or intense dehydration. It's a memory of emotional trauma, ingrained in you through no fault of your own, from critical childhood years that should have been spent under the tender lovingness and psychological safety provided by a parental figure. Your enemy rejoices in He's exiled because he thrives in barren isolation. That is the only way he has learned how to cope and survive. I hope that one day you can find the courage to say a few words to him. Perhaps you might even lift your gaze upward to look him in the eye, maybe even grow to understand him. Then finally, I pray you embrace and love him as your own, for veritably he is you, your inner abused child. Above all, I hope you know that beyond worldly recognition, accomplishment, and accolades, you are only very much worthy and capable of loving and being loved. All right, we're gonna read another two-star comment, and this is gonna be the last one. And Grant Oat says, utterly disappointed by this book. I loved Can't Hurt Me and was looking forward to David Goggins' sequel. However, this book seemed to just be Goggins sharing story after story of accomplishing amazing feats without training and with major health problems. All right, so let's check out this one. How to keep how to keep house while drowning. A gentle approach to cleaning and organizing. How to keep house while drowning will introduce you to 6 life-changing principles that will revolutionize the way you approach home care. Without endless to-do list presented in 31 daily thoughts, this compassionate guide will help you begin to get free of the shame and anxiety you feel over home care. Inside, you will learn how to shift your perspective of care tasks from moral to functional, how to stop negative self talk and shame around care tasks, how to give yourself permission to rest even when things aren't finished, how to motivate yourself to care for your space. Cool. Um, let's, let's filter out 2 stars, 3 stars. There are a lot of 3 stars. Let's check out 3 stars. Diane, uh, Diane S says 3, 3.5. Sometimes one is just not up to par, either physically or mentally, or both. This book does a good job describing shortcuts while making the point of points that this is not something for which you should feel shame. Keeping house with its myriad of chores is often not easy during the best of times and near impossible at others. Loved her matter of fact approach and thought some of its common sense others will be of use. And Rachel says, this is a kind of self help book to help with cleaning and household management. I appreciate the self care messaging, but I wish the book had more practical tips and ideas. There were some, but the practical sections were rather sparse. And Laura says, the good. She has fantastic practical tips on laundry and routine building. She also has great things to say about taking care of your body, even if you don't like your body. One of her tips, anything worth doing is worth doing half hours. Slightly adjusted to take out of the cussing. Uh, on the face of it, it's this sounds awful, but if you really think about it, it's gold. If clean the kitchen is on your to-do list, but homeschooling took longer than planned today, it's nearing lunchtime and the baby is screaming, but you have a window of 15 minutes to work on the kitchen. Do what you can and call it done. It's better than doing nothing at all. The bad? Some of our advice is really bad. Uh, didn't do your dishes for a month? A month? Throw them out. I'm sorry, what? Who on earth has enough money to buy new dishes every month because they decided to let them sit and mold instead of cleaning them? No, just no. She also says that laziness doesn't exist. Yes, it does. She also says that not cleaning is morally neutral because our home is meant to serve us instead of us serving it. Okay, that's totally fine. But she misses that things need to be maintained and taken care of in order to continue serving us. If you let stuff go long enough, it will break. The ugly part? She suggests, in a mocking tone, that Christianity is a works based religion. She mentions nothing about actual works based religions such as Islam. Something tells me she wouldn't mock them. All right, so that's how to keep house while drowning. Uh, I had I had a lot of good reviews around the psychology of money, and let me do it this way. We're gonna we're gonna sort based on the more number of like who which category has the most number of stars. So 48,005 stars, 31,004 stars, 9,003 stars, and only 582 one stars. Wow, and close to 1,402 stars. Nice. All right. Cool. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Doing well with money isn't necessarily about what you know, it's about how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. Money, investing, personal finance, and business decisions is typically taught as a math based field where data and formulas tell us exactly what to do. But in the real world, people don't make financial decisions on a spreadsheet. They make them at the dinner table or in a meeting room where personal history, your own unique view of the world, ego, pride, marketing, and odd incentives are scrambled together. In The Psychology of Money, award winning author Morgan Housel shares 19 short stories exploring the strange ways people think about money and teaches you how to make better sense of one of life's most important topics. Perfect. And I'm so happy that Riku Sayoj have at least listed out the titles of those 19 lessons. I'm hoping it's all 19, but let's see. So, pity book. There's some for you. Uh, Number one, people act from their experiences. Don't judge from yours. No one's crazy. Your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.000000001% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works. Number two, luck and risk is all around you. They don't fit the story you want to tell. Luck and risk is nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Number three, if you can't recognize when you have enough, you will soon have nothing. Never enough when rich people do crazy things. Number four, Warren Buffett could have been an ordinary investor if not for his longevity. Investing, if done well, is utterly boring. It's because the chief ingredient in the growth of a portfolio is time. Com- Confounding compounding. 81.5 billion of Warren Buffett's 84.5 billion net worth came after his 65th birthday. Our minds are not built to handle such absurdities. Number 5. More than big returns. Be financially unbreakable. If you're unbreakable, you actually will get the biggest returns because we'll be able to stick around long enough for compounding to work wonders. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. Number 6. The tail wags the dog in finance and business. Long tails, the farthest ends of a distribution of outcomes, have tremendous influence, whereas a smaller number of events can account for the majority of outcomes. Tails, you win. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Number 7. People want to become wealthier to make them happier. Happiness is a complicated subject because everyone's different. But if there's a common denominator in happiness, a universal fuel of joy, it's that people want to control their lives. It is the highest dividend money pays. Freedom. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. Number 8. The man in the fancy car is irrelevant because the observers are busy imagining themselves in it. Man in the car paradox. No one is impressed with your position as much as you are. Number 9. There is no faster way to feel rich than to spend lots of money on really nice things. There's no faster way to not be rich as well. That's the paradox of wealth. Wealth is what you don't see. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. Number 10. One of the most powerful ways to increase your savings isn't to raise your income, it's to raise your humility. Don't spend money to show you have money. Savings equal to income minus ego. Save money. The only factor you can control generates one of the only things that matters. How wonderful. Number 11. Adopt a reasonable strategy, not an ultra rational one. The plan that you are able to stick to is better than the one that looks good on a spreadsheet. Reasonable is greater than rational. Aiming to be mostly reasonable works better than trying to be coldly rational. Number 12. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. History is mostly the study of surprising events. 2020 should have taught us this, of course. Surprise! History is a study of change, ironically used as a map of the future. Number 13. Margin of safety. You can also call it room for error. It's the only effective way to safely navigate a world that is governed by odds, not certainties. Room for error? The most important part of every plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan. Number 14. An underpinning of psychology is that people are poor forecasters of their future selves. Imagining a goal is easy and fun. Imagining a goal in the context of the realistic life stresses that grow with competitive pursuits is something entirely different. You'll change. Long-term planning is harder than it seems because people's goals and desires change over time. Number 15. Don't think of market losses from fluctuating. Number 15. Don't think of market losses from fluctuations are as a fine, but as an admission fee. It will help you stay in longer. Nothing's free. Everything has a price, but not all prices appear on labels. Number 16. The financial game has one fundamental parameter, the time horizon. Never copy someone working with a different time horizon than you are. You and me. Beware taking financial cues from people playing a different game than you are. Number 17. Optimism is the best bet for most people because the world tends to get better for most people most of the time. Progress happens too slowly to notice, but setbacks happen too quickly to ignore. Pessimism sounds smarter, but optimism is the long game. The seduction of pessimism. Optimism sounds like a sales pitch. Pessimism sounds like someone trying to help you. Number 18. Trying to make sense of the world is the cause of most mistakes. Psychologist Philip Tetlock once wrote, "We need to believe we live in a predictable, controllable world, so we turn to authoritative sounding people who promise to satisfy that need. Respect the mess." When you believe anything, appealing fictions and why stories are more powerful than statistics. Shout out to Riku Sayuj. Okay. Uh, what is this? The blog post that turned into a book. Tae Hui Link's review. CFA webinar. The blogs.cfainstitute.org web link somewhere. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Lessons from Rajat Gupta of MCK. Where are we going with this? So this particular user, they read the book and none of this is from the book. I don't know if gotta be right. At least some of it is. This leads nowhere. Lauren Foster, 22nd October. So this gotta be pretty recent comment. September 13th, 2020. It's been a while. Oh, this is 2020. My bad. Cool. I don't know if I want to check out all of this, but well, how about this? This seems kind of interesting. So let's dive into this one. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Let me tell you the story of two investors, neither of whom knew each other, but whose paths crossed in an interesting way. Grace Groner was orphaned at age 12. She never married, she never had kids, she never drove a car. She lived most of her life alone in a one-bedroom house and worked her whole career as a secretary. She was, by all accounts, a lovely lady, but she lived a humble and quiet life. That made the 7 million she left to charity after her death in 2010 at age 100 all the more confusing. People who knew her asked, where did Grace get all that money? But there was no secret. There was no inheritance. Grace took humble savings from a mere salary and enjoyed 80 years of hands off compounding in the stock market. That was it. Weeks after Grace died, an unrelated investing story hit the news. Richard Fuscone, former vice chairman of Merrill Lynch Latin America division, declared personal bankruptcy, fighting off foreclosure on two homes, one of which was nearly 20,000 square feet and had a 66,000 a month mortgage. Fuscone was the opposite of Grace Groner. Educated at Harvard and University of Chicago, he became so successful in the investment industry that he retired in his 40s to pursue personal and charitable interest. But heavily borrowing and illiquid investments did him in. The same year Grace Garner left a veritable fortune to charity, Richard stood before a bankruptcy judge and declared, I have been devastated by the financial crisis. The only source of liquidity is whatever my wife is able to sell in terms of personal furnishings. The purpose of these stories is not to say you should be like Grace and avoid being like Richard. It's to point out that there is no other field where these stories are even possible. In what other field does someone with no education, no relevant experience, no resources, and no connections vastly outperform someone with the best education, the most relevant experiences, the best resource, and the best connections? There will never be a story of a Grace Groner performing heart surgery better than a Harvard trained cardiologist, or building a faster chip than Apple's engineers. Unthinkable. But these stories happen in investing. That's because investing is not the study of finance. It's the study of how people behave with money. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. You can't sum up behavior with formulas to memorize or spreadsheet models to follow. Behavior is inborn, varies by person, in hard to measure, changes over time, and people are prone to deny its existence, especially when describing themselves. Grace and Richard show that managing money isn't necessarily about what you know, it's how you behave. But that's not how finance is typically taught or discussed. The finance industry talks too much about what to do and not enough about what happens in your head when you try to do it. This report describes 20 flaws, biases, and causes of bad behavior I've seen pop up often when people deal with money. Like, number one, earned success and deserved failure fallacy. A tendency to underestimate the role of luck and risk, and a failure to recognize that luck and risk are different sides of the same coin. I like to ask people, what do you want to know about investing that we can't know? It's not a practical question. So few people ask it, but it forces anyone you ask to think about what they intuitively think is true, but don't spend much time trying to answer because it's futile. Years ago, I asked economist Robert Shiller the question. He answered, the exact role of luck is in successful outcomes. I love that because no one thinks luck doesn't play a role in financial success. But since it's hard to quantify luck and rude to suggest people's success is owed to luck, the default stance is often to implicitly ignore luck as a factor. If I say there are a billion investors in the world, by sheer chance, would you expect 100 of them to become billionaires predominantly of luck? You would reply, of course. But then if I ask you to name those investors to their face, you will back down. That's the problem. The same goes for failure. Did failed businesses not try hard enough? Were bad investments not thought through well enough? Are wayward careers the product of laziness? In some parts, yes, of course, but how much? It's so hard to know. And when it's hard to know, we default to the extremes of assuming failures as predominantly caused by mistakes, which itself is a mistake. People's lives are a reflection of the experiences that People's lives are a reflection of the experiences they have had and the people they have met, a lot of which are driven by luck, accident, and chance. The line between bold and reckless is thinner than people think, and you cannot believe in risk without believing in luck, because they are two sides of the same coin. They are both the simple idea that sometimes things happen that influence outcomes more than effort alone can achieve. After my son was born, I wrote him a letter. Some people are born into families that encourage education, others are against it. Some are born into flourishing economies, encouraging of entrepreneurship, others are born into war and destitution. I want you to be successful, and I want you to earn it. But realize that not all success is due to hard work, and not all poverty is due to laziness. Keep this in mind when judging people, including yourself. Point number two, cost avoidance syndrome. A failure to identify the true cost of a situation, with too much emphasis on financial cost while ignoring the emotional price that must be paid to win a reward. Say you want a new car, it costs $30,000. You have a few options. Option 1, pay $30,000 for it. Option 2, buy a used one for less than $30,000. Or option 3, steal it. In this case, 99% of people avoid the third option because the consequences of stealing a car outweigh the upside. This is obvious. But say you want to earn a 10% annual return over the next 50 years. Does this reward come free? Of course not. Why would the world give you something amazing for free? Like the car, there's a price that has to be paid. The price in this case is volatility and uncertainty. And like the car, you have a few options. You can pay it, accept volatility and uncertainty. You can find an asset with less uncertainty and lower payoff, the equivalent of a used car. Or you can attempt the equivalent of Grand Theft Auto. Take the return while trying to avoid the volatility while that comes along with it. Many people in this case choose the third option, like a car thief. Though well meaning and law abiding, they form tricks and strategies to get the return without paying the price. Trades, rotations, hedge, arbitrages, leverage. But the money gods do not look highly upon those who seek a reward without paying the price. Some car thieves will get away with it, many more will be caught with their pants down. Same thing with money. This is obvious with the car and less obvious with investing because the true cost of investing or anything with money is rarely the financial fee that is easy to see and measure. It's the emotional and physical price demanded by markets that are pretty efficient. Monster beverage stock rose 211,000% from 1995 to 2016, but it lost more than half its value on five separate occasions during that time. That is an enormous psychological price to pay. Buffett made 90 billion, but he did it by reading SEC filings 12 hours a day for 70 years, often at the expense of paying attention to his family. Here too, a hidden cost. Every money reward has a price beyond the financial fee you can see and count. Accepting that is critical. Scott Adams once wrote, "One of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard goes something like this. If you want success, figure out the price, then pay it." It sounds trivial and obvious, but if you unpack the idea, it has extraordinary power. Wonderful money advice. Point 3. Rich man in the car paradox. When you see someone driving a nice car, you rarely think, wow, the guy driving that car is cool. Instead, you think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I am cool. Subconscious or not, this is how people think. The paradox of wealth is that people tend to want it to signal to others that they should be liked and admired, but in reality, those other people bypass admiring you, not because they don't think wealth is admirable, but because they use your wealth solely as a benchmark for their own desire to be liked and admired. This stuff isn't subtle. It is prevalent at every income and wealth level. There is a growing business of people renting private jets on the tarmac for 10 minutes to take a selfie inside the jet for Instagram. The people taking these selfies think they are going to be loved without realizing that they probably don't care about the person who actually owns the jet beyond the fact that they provided a jet to be photographed in. The point isn't to abandon the pursuit of wealth, of course, or even fancy cars. I like both. It's recognizing that people generally aspire to be respected by others, and humility, graciousness, intelligence, and empathy tend to generate more respect than fast cars. Point number 4. A tendency to adjust to current circumstances in a way that makes forecasting your future desires and actions difficult, resulting in the inability to capture long term compounding rewards that come from current decisions. Every 5-year-old boy wants to drive a tractor when they grow up. Then you grow up and realize that driving a tractor maybe isn't the best career. So, as a teenager, you dream of being a lawyer. Then you realize that lawyers work so hard they rarely see their families. So then you become a stay-at-home parent. Then at age 70, you realize you should have saved more money for retirement. Things change. And it's hard to make long-term decisions when your view of what you'll want in the future is so liable to shift. This gets back to the first rule of compounding. Never interrupt it unnecessarily. But how do you not interrupt a money plan? Careers, investments, spending, budgeting, whatever, when your life plans change? It's hard. Part of the reason people like Grace Groner and Warren Buffett became so successful is because they kept doing the same thing for decades on end. letting compounding run wild. But many of us evolve so much over a lifetime that we don't want to keep doing the same thing for decades on end, or anything close to it. So rather than one 80 something year lifespan, our money has perhaps four distinct 20-year blocks. Compounding doesn't work as well in that situation. There is no solution to this. But one thing I've learned that may help is coming back to balance and room for error. Too much devotion to one goal, one path, one outcome is asking for regret when you're so susceptible to change. Point number five, anchored to your own history bias. Your personal experiences make up maybe 0.000000001% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works. If you were born in 1970, the stock market went up tenfold, adjusted for inflation in your teens and 20s, your young impressionable years when you were learning baseline knowledge about how investing and the economy work. If you were born in 1950, the same market went exactly nowhere in your teens and 20s. So, what stocks did in your teens and 20s depending on when you are born. So, born in 1970, the stock rose or grew tenfold compared to 1950s. And there are so many ways to cut this idea. Someone who grew up in Flint, Michigan got a very different view of the importance of manufacturing jobs than someone who grew up in the Washington D.C. coming of age during the Great Depression or in war-ravaged 1940s Europe. Set you on a path of beliefs, goals, and priorities that most people reading this, including myself, can't fathom. The Great Depression scared a generation. I knew it. It's doing this again. The Great Depression scared a generation for the rest of their lives. Most of them, at least. In 1959, John F. Kennedy was asked by a reporter what he remembered from the Depression and answered, I have no first hand knowledge of the Depression. My family had one of the great fortunes of the world, and it was worth more than ever then. We had bigger houses, more servants, we traveled more. About the one thing that I saw directly was when my father hired some extra gardeners just to give them a job so they could eat. I really did not learn about the Depression until I read about it at Harvard. Since no amount of studying or open mindedness can genuinely recreate the power of fear and uncertainty, people go through life with totally different views on how the economy works, what it's capable of doing, how much we should protect other people, and what should and shouldn't be valued. The problem is that everyone needs a clear explanation of how the world works to keep their sanity. It's hard to be optimistic if you wake up in the morning and say, I don't know why most people think the way they do. Because people like the feeling of predictability and clean narratives. So they use the lessons of their own life experiences to create models of how they think the world should work, particularly for things like luck, risk, effort, and values. And that's a problem. When everyone has experienced a fraction of what's out there, but uses those experiences to explain everything they expect to happen, a lot of people eventually become disappointed, confused, or dumbfounded at others' decisions. A team of economists once crushed the data on a century's worth of people's investing habits and concluded current investment beliefs depend on the realizations experienced in the past. Keep that quote in mind when debating people's investing views or when you're confused about their desire to hold or blow money, their fear or greed in certain situations, or whenever else you can't understand why people do what they do with money. Things will make more sense. Point number six, historians are prophets' fallacy. Not seeing the irony that history is the study of surprises and changes while using it as a guide to the future. An over reliance on past data as a signal to future conditions in a field where innovation and change is the lifeblood of progress. Geologists can look at a billion years of historical data and form models of how the Earth behaves. So can meteorologists. And doctors, uh, kidneys operate the same way in 2018 as they did in 1018. The idea that the past offers concrete directions about the future is tantalizing. It promotes the idea that the path of the future is buried within the data. Historians or anyone analyzing the past as a way to indicate the future are some of the most important members of many fields. I don't think finance is one of them, at least not as much as we'd like to think. The cornerstone of economics is that things change over time because the invisible hand hates anything staying too good or too bad indefinitely. Bill Bonner once described how Mr. Market works. He's got a capitalism at work t shirt on and a sledgehammer in his hand. Few things stay the same for very long, which makes historians something far less useful than prophets. Consider a few big ones. The 401k is 39-year-old, barely old enough to run for president. The Roth IRA isn't old enough to drink. So, personal financial advice and analysis about how Americans save for retirement today is not directly comparable to what made sense just a generation ago. Things changed. The venture capital industry barely existed 25 years ago. There are single funds today that are larger than the entire industry was a generation ago. Phil Knight wrote about his early days after starting Nike. There was no such thing as venture capital. An aspiring young entrepreneur had very few places to turn, and those places were all guarded by risk averse gatekeepers with zero imagination. In other words, bankers. So, our knowledge of backing entrepreneurs, investment cycles, and failure rates is not something we have a deep base of history to learn from. Things changed. Or take public markets. The S&P 500 did not include financial stocks until 1976. Today, financials make up 16% of the index. Technology stocks were virtually non existent 50 years ago. Today, they are more than a fifth of the index. Accounting rules have changed over time, so have disclosures, auditing, and market liquidity. Things changed. The most important driver of anything tied to money is the stories people tell themselves and the preferences they have for goods and services. Those things don't tend to sit still. They change with culture and generation, and they'll keep changing. The mental trick we play on ourselves here is an over admiration of people who have been there, done that when it comes to money. Experiencing specific events does not necessarily qualify you to know what will happen next. In fact, it rarely does, because experience leads to more overconfidence than prophetic ability. That doesn't mean we should ignore history when thinking about money, but there's an important nuance. The further back in history you look, the more general your takeaways should be. General things like people's relationship to greed and fear, how they behave under stress, and how they respond to incentives tends to be stable in time. The history of money is useful for that kind of stuff, but specific trends, specific trades, specific sectors, and specific casual relationships are always a showcase of evolution in progress. Point 7. The seduction of pessimism in a world where optimism is the most reasonable stance. Historian Deirdre McCloskey says, for reasons I've never understood, people like to hear that the world is going to hell. This isn't new. John Stuart Mill wrote in the 1840s, I have observed that not the man who hopes when others despair, but the man who despairs when others hope is admired by a large class of peoples as a sage. Part of this is natural. We have evolved to treat threats as more urgent than opportunities. Buffett says, In order to succeed, you must first survive. But pessimism about money takes a different level of allure. Say there's going to be a recession and you will get retweeted. Say we'll have a big recession and newspapers will call you. Say we are nearing the next Great Depression and you'll get on TV. But mention that good times are ahead, or markets have room to run, or that a company has huge potential. And a common reaction from commentators and spectators alike is that you are either a salesman or comically aloof of risk. A few things are going on here. One is that money is ubiquitous. So something bad happening tends to affect everyone, albeit in different ways. That isn't true of, say, weather. A hurricane barreling down on Florida poses no direct risk to 92% of Americans, but a recession barreling down on the economy would impact every single person, including you. So pay attention. This goes for something as specific as the stock market. More than half of the households directly own stocks. Another is that pessimism requires action. Move, get out, run, sell, hide. Optimism is mostly a call to stay the course and enjoy the ride. So it's not nearly as urgent. A third is that there is a lot of money to be made in the finance industry, which, despite regulations, has attracted armies of scammers, hucksters, and truth benders promising the moon. A big enough bonus can convince even honest, law abiding finance workers selling garbage products that they are doing good for their customers. Enough people have been bamboozled by the finance industry that a sense of if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, has enveloped even rational promotions of optimism. Most promotions of optimism, by the way, are rational. Not all, of course, but we need to understand what optimism is. Real optimists don't believe that everything will be great. That's complacency. Optimism is a belief that the odds of a good outcome are in your favor over time, even when there will be setbacks along the way. The simple idea that most people wake up in the morning trying to make things a little better and more productive than wake up looking to cause trouble is the foundation of optimism. It's not complicated, it's not guaranteed either. It's just the most reasonable bet for most people. The late statistician Hans Rosling put it differently. I'm not an optimist, I'm a very serious possibilist. Point number 8, underappreciating the power of compounding. Driven by the tendency to intuitively think about exponential growth in linear terms. IBM made a 3.5 megabyte hard drive in the 1950s. By the 1960s, things were moving into a few dozen megabytes. By the 1970s, IBM's Winchester drive held 70 megabytes. Then drives got exponentially smaller in size with more storage. A typical PC in the year 1990s held 200 to 500 megabytes. And then, wham! Things exploded. 1999, Apple's iMac comes with a 6 gigabyte hard drive. 2003, 120 gigs on the Power Mac. 2006, 250 gigs on the new iMac. 2011, first 4 terabyte hard drive. 2017, 60 terabyte hard drives. Now put it together. From 1950 to 1990, we gained 296 megabytes. From 1990 through today, we gained 60 million megabytes. The punchline of compounding is never that it's just big. It's always, no matter how many times you study it, so big that you can barely wrap your head around it. In 2004, Bill Gates criticized the new Gmail, wondering why anyone would need a gig of storage. Author Stephen Levy wrote, despite his currency with cutting edge technologies, his mentality was anchored in the old paradigm of storage behind a commodity that must be conserved. You never get accustomed to how quickly things can grow. I have heard many people say the first time they saw a compound interest table or one of those stories about how much more you'd have for retirement if you begin saving in your 20s versus your 30s changed their life. But it probably didn't. What it likely did was surprise them because the results intuitively didn't seem right. Linear thinking is so much more intuitive than exponential thinking. Michael Batnick once explained it. If I ask you to calculate 8 plus 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 8 in your head, you can do it in a few seconds. It's 72. If I ask you to calculate 8 times 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 8, your head will explode. It's 134,217,728. The danger here is that when compounding isn't intuitive, we often ignore its potential and focus on solving problems through other means. Not because we are overthinking, but because we rarely stop to consider compounding potential. There are over 2,000 books picking apart how Warren Buffett built his fortune, but none are called "The Guy Has Been Investing Consistently for Three-Quarters of a Century." But we know that's the key to the majority of its success. It's just hard to wrap your head around that math because it's not intuitive. There are books on economic cycles, trading strategies, and sector bets. But the most powerful and important book should be called Shut Up and Wait. It's just one page with a long term chart of economic growth. Physicist Albert Bartlett put it: the greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. The counterintuitiveness of compounding is reasonable for the majority of disappointing trades, bad strategies, and successful investing attempts. Good investing isn't necessarily about earning the highest returns because the highest returns tend to be one off hits that kill your confidence when they end. It's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with for a long period of time. That's when compounding runs wild. Number 9. Attachment to social proof in a field that demands contrarian thinking to achieve above average results. The Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting in Omaha attracts 40,000 people, all of whom consider themselves constraints. People show up at 4 a.m. to wait in line with thousands of other people to tell each other about their lifelong commitment to not following the crowd. Few see the irony. Anything worthwhile with money has high stakes. High stakes entail risk of being wrong and losing money. Losing money is emotional, and the desire to avoid being wrong is best countered by surrounding yourself with people who agree with you. Social proof is powerful. Someone else agreeing with you is like evidence of being right that doesn't have to prove itself with the facts. Most people's views have holes and gaps in them, if only subconsciously. Crowds and social proof help fill those gaps, reducing doubt that you could be wrong. The problem with viewing crowds as evidence of accuracy when dealing with money is that opportunity is almost always inversely correlated with popularity. What really drives outsized returns over time is an increase in valuation multiplies. And increasing valuation multiplies relies on an investment getting more popular in the future, something that is always anchored by current popularity. Here's the thing. Most attempts at contrarianism is just irrational cynicism in disguise. And cynicism can be popular and draw crowds. Real contrarianism is when your views are so uncomfortable and belittled that they cause you to second guess whether they are right. Very few people can do that. But of course, that's the case. Most people can't be contrarian by definition. embrace with both hands that statistically you are one of those people. Number 10, an appeal to academia, an appeal to academia in a field that is governed not by clean rules but loose and unpredictable trends. Harry Markowitz won the Nobel Prize in Economics for creating formulas that tell you exactly how much of your portfolio should be in stocks versus bonds, depending on your ideal level of risk. A few years ago, the Wall Street Journal asked him how, given his work, he invests his own money. He replied, I visualize my grief if the stock market went way up and I wasn't in it, or if it went way down and I was completely in it. My intention was to minimize my future regret. So I split my contributions 50-50 between bonds and equities. There are many things in academic finance that are technically right but fail to describe how people actually act in the real world. Plenty of academic finance work is useful and has pushed the industry in the right direction, but its main purpose is often intellectual stimulation and to impress other academics. I don't blame them for this or look down upon them for it. We should just recognize it for what it is. One study I remember showed that young investors should use two times leverage in the stock market because statistically, even if you get wiped out, you're still likely to earn superior returns over time, as long as you dust yourself off and keep investing after a wipeout, which in the real world, no one would actually do. They'd swear off investing for life. What works on a spreadsheet and what works at a kitchen table are 10 miles apart. The disconnect here is that academics typically desire very precise rules and formulas, but real world people use it as a crutch to try to make sense of a messy and confusing world that, by its nature, eschews precision. Those are opposite things. You cannot explain randomness and emotion with precision and reason. People are also attracted to the titles and degrees of academics because finance is not a credential sanctioned field like, say, medicine is. So the appearance of a PhD stands out. And that creates an intense appeal to academia when making arguments and justifying beliefs. According to this Harvard study, or as Nobel Prize winner so and so showed, it carries so much weight when other people cite some guy on CNBC from an eponymous firm with a tie and a smile. A hard reality is that what often matters most in finance will never win a Nobel Prize: humility and room for error. Number 11. The social utility of money coming at the direct experience of growing money. Wealth is what you don't see. I used to park cars at a hotel. This was in the mid 2000s in Los Angeles when real estate money flowed. I assumed that a customer driving a Ferrari was rich. Many were. But as I got to know some of these people, I realized they weren't that successful. At least not nearly what I assumed. Many were mediocre successes who spent most of their money on a car. If you see someone driving a 200,000 car, the only data point you have about their wealth is that they have 200,000 less than they did before they bought the car, or they are leasing the car, which truly offers no indication of wealth. We tend to judge wealth by what we see. We can't see people's bank accounts or brokerage statements, so we rely on outward appearances to gauge financial success. Cars, homes, vacations, Instagram photos. But this is America. And one of our cherished industries is helping people fake it until they make it. Wealth, in fact, is what you don't see. It's the cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the renovations postponed, the clothes foregone, and the first class upgrade declined. It's assets in the bank that haven't yet been converted into the stuff you see. But that's not how we think about wealth, because you can't contextualize what you can't see. Singer Rihanna nearly went broke after overspending and sued her financial advisor. The advisor responded, was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money? You can laugh, but the truth is, yes, people need to be told that. When most people say they want to be a millionaire, what they really mean is, I want to spend $1 million, which is literally the opposite of being a millionaire. This is especially true for young people. A key use of wealth is using it to control your time and providing you with options. Financial assets on a balance sheet offer that, but they come at the direct expense of showing people how much wealth you have with material stuff. Number 12, a tendency toward action in a field where the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. If your sink breaks, you grab a wrench and fix it. If your arm breaks, you put it in a cast. What do you do when your financial plan breaks? The first question, and this goes for personal finance, business finance, and investing plans, is how do you know when it's broken? A broken sink is obvious, but a broken investment plan is open to interpretation. Maybe it's just temporarily out of favor. Maybe you're experiencing normal volatility. Maybe you had a bunch of one off expenses this quarter, but your savings rate is still adequate. It's hard to know. When it's hard to distinguish broken from temporarily out of favor, the tendency is to default to the former and spring into action. You start fiddling with the knobs to find a fix. This seems like the reasonable or responsible thing to do because when virtually everything else in your life is broken, the correct actions is to fix it. There are times when money plans need to be fixed. Oh, are there ever? But there is also no such thing as a long term money plan that isn't susceptible to volatility. Occasional upheaval is usually part of a standard plan. When volatility is guaranteed and normal, but is often treated as something that needs to be fixed, people take actions that ultimately just interrupts the execution of a good plan. Don't do anything are the most powerful words in finance, but they are both hard for individuals to accept and hard for professionals to charge a fee for. So we fiddle far too much. Number 13, underestimating the need for room for error, not just financially, but mentally and physically. Ben Graham once said, the purpose of the margin of safety is to render the forecast unnecessary. There is so much wisdom in this quote, but the most common response, even if subconsciously, is, thanks, Ben, but I'm good at forecasting. People underestimate the need for room for error in almost everything they do that involves money. Two things cause this. One is the idea that your view of the future is right, driven by the uncomfortable feeling that comes from admitting the opposite. The second is that you're therefore doing yourself economic harm by not taking actions that exploit your view of the future coming true. But room for error is underappreciated and misunderstood. It's often viewed as a conservative hedge used by those who don't want to take much risk or aren't confident in their views. But when used appropriately, it's the opposite. Room for error lets you endure, the endurance lets you stick around long enough to let the odds of benefiting from a low probability outcome fall in your favor. The biggest gains occur infrequently, either because they don't happen often or because they take time to compound. So the person with enough room for error in part of their strategy to let them endure hardship in the other part of this strategy has an edge over the person who gets wiped out. Game over. Insert more tokens when they are wrong. There are also multiple sides to room for error. You can survive your assets declining by 30%, On a spreadsheet, maybe yes. In terms of actually paying your bills and staying cash flow positive. But what about mentality? It is easy to underestimate what a 30% decline does to your psyche. Your confidence may become shot at the very moment opportunity is at its highest. You or your spouse may decide it's time for a new plan or a new career. I know several investors who quit after losses because they were exhausted, physically exhausted. Spreadsheets can model the historic frequency of big declines, but they cannot model the feeling of coming home, looking at your kids, and wondering if you have made a huge mistake that will impact their lives. Number 14, a tendency to be influenced by the actions of other people who are playing a different financial game than you are. Cisco's stock went up threefold in 1999. Why? Probably not because people actually thought the company was worth 600 billion. Burton Malkiel once pointed out that Cisco's implied growth rate at that valuation meant it would become larger than the entire US economy within 20 years. Its stock price was going up because short term traders thought it would keep going up. And they were right for a long time. That was the game they were playing. This stock is trading for 60 bucks and I think it will be worth 65 before tomorrow. But if you were a long-term investor in 1999, $60 was the only price available to buy. So you may have looked around and said to yourself, wow, maybe others know something I don't. And you went along with it. You even felt smart about it. But then the traders stopped playing their game and your game was annihilated. What you don't realize is that the traders moving the marginal price are playing a totally different game than you are. And if you start taking cues from people playing a different game than you are bound to be fooled and eventually become lost, since different games have different rules and different goals. Few things matter more with money than understanding your own time horizon and not being persuaded by the actions and behaviors of people playing different games. This goes beyond investing. How you save, how you spend, what your business strategy is, how you think about money when you retire, and how you think about risk may all be influenced by the actions and behaviors of people who are playing different games than you are. Personal finance is deeply personal, and one of the hardest parts is learning from others while realizing that their goal and actions might be miles removed from what's relevant to your own life. Number 15, an attachment to financial entertainment due to the fact that money is emotional and emotions are revved up by argument, extreme views, flashing lights, and threats to your well being. If the average American's blood pressure went up by 3%, my guess is a few newspapers would cover it on page 16. Nothing would change and we'd move on. But if the stock market falls 3%, well, no need to guess how we might respond. This is from 2015. President Barack Obama has been briefed on Monday's choppy global market movement. Why does financial news of seemingly low importance overwhelm news that is objectively more important? Okay, I realized that the screen is stuck again. I hate it when that happens. This is such a painful thing to do. I gotta find a fix for this, and I don't know why it's doing this. This is insane. Okay, so we were here, number 15. Number 15, an attachment to financial entertainment due to the fact that money is emotional and emotions are revved up by argument, extreme views, flashing lights, and threats to your well being. If the average American's blood pressure went up by 3%, my guess is a few newspapers would cover it on page 16. Nothing would change and we'd move on. But if the stock market falls 3%, well, no need to guess how we might respond. This is from 2015. President Barack Obama has been briefed on Monday's choppy global market movement. Why does financial news of seemingly low importance overwhelm news that is objectively more important? Because finance is entertaining in a way other things like orthodontics, gardening, marine biology are not. Money has competition, rules, upsets, wins, losses, heroes, villains, teams, and fans that makes it tantalizingly close to a sporting event. But it's even an addiction level up from that. Because money is like a sporting event where you're both the fan and the player, with outcomes affecting you both emotionally and directly, which is dangerous. It helps, I found, when making money decisions to constantly remind yourself that the purpose of investing is to maximize returns, not minimize boredom. Boring is perfectly fine. Boring is good. If you want to frame this as a strategy, remind yourself opportunity lives where others aren't, and others tend to stay away from what's boring. Point 16. Optimism bias in risk taking or Russian roulette should statistically work syndrome, an overattachment to favorable odds when the downside is unacceptable in any circumstance. Nassim Taleb says, you can be risk loving and yet completely averse to ruin. The idea is that you have to take risk to get ahead, but no risk that could wipe you out is ever worth taking. The odds are in your favor when playing Russian roulette, but the downside is never worth the potential upside. The odds of something can be in your favor. Real estate prices go up most years, and most years you'll get a paycheck every other week. But if something has 95% odds of being right, then 5% odds of being wrong means you will almost certainly experience the downside at some point in your life. And if the cost of the downside is ruin, the upside, the other 95% of the time, likely isn't worth the risk, no matter how appealing it looks. Leverage is the devil here. It pushes routine risk into something capable of producing ruin. The danger is that rational optimism most of the time masks the odds of ruin some of the time in a way that lets us systematically underestimate risk. Housing prices fell 30% last decade. A few companies defaulted on their debt. This is capitalism. It happens. But those with leverage had a double wipeout. Not only were they left broke, but being wiped out erased every opportunity to get back in the game at the very moment opportunity was ripe. A homeowner wiped out in 2009 had no chance of taking advantage of cheap mortgage rates in 2010. Lehman Brothers had no chance of investing in cheap debt in 2009. My own money is barbelled. I take risk with one portion and am a terrified turtle with the other. This is not inconsistent, but the psychology of money would lead you to believe that it is. I just want to ensure I can remain standing long enough for my risk to pay off. Again, you have to survive to succeed. A key point here is that few things in money are as valuable as options. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, and why you want has infinite ROI. Number 17, a preference for skills in a field where skills don't matter if they aren't matched with the right behavior. This is where Grace and Richard come back in. There is a hierarchy of investor needs, and each topic here has to be mastered before the one above it matters. So, at the bottom, investor behavior, and then asset allocation, and then fees and transaction costs, and then security selection, and then taxes. Richard was very skilled at the top of the pyramid, which is taxes, but he failed the bottom blocks. So None of it mattered. Grace mastered the bottom blocks so well that the top blocks were hardly necessary. Number 18, denial of inconsistencies between how you think the world should work and how the world actually works, driven by a desire to form a clean narrative of cause and effect despite the inherent complexities of everything involving money. Someone once described Donald Trump as unable to distinguish between what happened and what he thinks should have happened. Politics aside, I think everyone does this. There are three parts to this. You see a lot of information in the world. You can't process all of it, so you have to filter. You only filter in the information that meshes with the way you think the world should work. Since everyone wants to explain what they see and how the world works with clean narratives, inconsistencies between what we think should happen and what actually happens are buried. An example: higher taxes should slow economic growth. That's a common sense narrative. But the correlation between tax rates and growth rates is hard to spot. So, if you hold on to the narrative between taxes and growth, you say there must be something wrong with the data. And you may be right, but if you come across someone else pushing aside data to back up their narrative, say arguing that hedge funds have to generate alpha, otherwise no one would invest in them, you spot what you consider a bias. There are a thousand other examples. Everyone just believes what they want to believe, even when the evidence shows something else. Stories over statistics. Accepting that everything involving money is driven by illogical emotions and has more moving parts than anyone can grasp is a good start to remembering that history is the study of things happening that people didn't think would or could happen. This is especially true with money. Number 19. Political beliefs driving financial decisions, influenced by economics, being a misbehaved cousin of politics. I once attended a conference where a well known investor began his talk by saying, "You know, when President Obama talks about clinging to guns and Bibles, that is me, folks. And I'm going to tell you today about how his reckless policies are impacting the economy." I don't care what your politics are, there is no possible way you can make rational investment decisions with that kind of thinking. But it's fairly common. Look at what happens in 2016 on this chart. The rate of GDP growth, jobs growth, stock market growth, interest rates, go down the list, did not materially change. Only the president did. Okay, so average based on Gallup polls. Annual US Economic Confidence Index scores. Okay. Well, whoever is in power, people have more confidence on them. Okay. Years ago, I published a bunch of economic performance numbers by president, and it drove people crazy because the data often didn't mesh with how they thought it should based on their political beliefs. Soon after, a journalist asked me to comment on a story detailing how, statistically, Democrats preside over stronger economies than Republicans. I said you couldn't make that argument because the sample size is way too small. But he pushed and wrote a piece that made readers either cheer or sweat depending on their beliefs. The point is not that politics don't influence the economy, but the reason this is such a sensitive topic is because the data often surprises the heck out of people, which itself is a reason to realize that the correlation between politics and economics isn't as clear as you'd like to think it is. Number 20, the 3 month bubble. extrapolating the recent past into the near future, and then overestimating the extent to which whatever you anticipate will happen in the near future will impact your future. News headlines in the month after 9/11 are interesting. Few entertained the idea that the attack was a one off. The next massive terrorist attack was certain to be around the corner. Another catastrophic terrorist attack is inevitable and only a matter of time, one defense analyst said in 2002. A top counterterrorism official says it's a question of when, not if, wrote another headline. Beyond the anticipation that another attack was imminent was a belief that it would affect people the same way. The Today Show ran a segment pitching parachutes for office workers to keep under their desk in case they needed to jump out of a skyscraper. Believing that what just happened will keep happening shows up constantly in psychology. We like patterns and have short memories. The added feeling that a repeat of what just happened will keep affecting you the same way is an offshoot. And when you're dealing with money, it can be a torment. Every big financial win or loss is followed by mass expectations of more wins and losses. With it comes a level of obsession over the effects of those events repeating that can be wildly disconnected from your long term goals. Example: the stock market falling 40% in 2008 was followed uninterrupted for years, with forecast of another impending plunge. Expecting what just happened to happen soon again is one thing, and an error in itself. But not realizing that your long term investing goals could remain intact, unharmed, even if we have another big plunge, is the dangerous byproduct of recency bias. Markets tend to recover over time and make new highs. What's not a popular takeaway from the financial crisis? Markets can crash and crashes suck. Was. Despite the former being so much more practical than the latter. Most of the time, something big happening doesn't increase the odds of it happening again. It's the opposite. As mean revision is a merciless law of finance. But even when something does happen again, most of the time it doesn't or shouldn't, impact your actions in the way you're tempted to think. Because most extrapolations are short term, while most goals are long term. A stable strategy designed to endure change is almost always superior to one that attempts to guard against whatever just happened happening again. If there's a common denominator in these, it's the preference for humility, adaptability, long time horizons, and skepticism of popularity around anything involving money, which can be summed up as be prepared to roll with the punches. Jiddu Krishnamurti spent years giving spiritual talks. He became more candid as he got older. In one famous talk, he asked the audience if they'd like to know his secret. He whispered, "You see, I don't mind what happens." That might be the best trick when dealing with the psychology of money. Wow, that was pretty long article, and I can't believe we are coming closer to a 2 hour mark. I bet like and this whole article itself was an hour long read, which is nice. I mean, I'm glad I stumbled on this article and were able to expand some of the points from the book. And honestly, a lot of those points are super obvious. May not be super obvious per se, but um, commonsensical at the very least. Um, and at the same time, while I was reading some of those, I was like, oh shoot, I don't follow this. So something new to learn, and or like behavior wise, mindset wise. So it's always good to read more books and understand different point of views, and then see how you can adapt that into your own life. And I believe that's the whole secret of life. There is no secret. Everything is out there. All you need to do is like find a good lens and mindset to learn from everything and everywhere, and then make it personal, like adapt into your life, especially for the things which you feel that are useful and helpful, and you see yourself doing that to achieve the goal you want. So all of that. Well, with that note, I'll see you next time.